I paid $20,000 for a family vacation to Hawaii. But at the airport, my son looked me in the eye and said, "I forgot to buy your ticket. Just go home." They thought I'd quietly disappear. They had no idea what was coming next. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The terminal buzzed with the sound of rolling luggage and excited chatter, but for me, time froze with a single sentence. My son stood in front of me, eyes fixed on the departure board, and said the words that ripped through me like a blade. "I forgot to buy your ticket. Just go home." My suitcase handle felt suddenly heavy in my grip. For 3 months, I had dreamed of this trip to Hawaii, of watching my grandchildren splash in turquoise water, of feeling a little less alone since my wife passed. I had poured $20,000 into this family vacation, trusting Simon to handle every detail. He was supposed to carry the logistics. I was supposed to carry the joy. But standing there, under the glow of gate numbers flashing in red, I realized I wasn't part of the plan at all. I searched his face for some trace of mistake, some flicker of guilt. Instead, I saw relief. Relief that I would not be joining them. Relief that their paradise would not include the man who had paid for it. Travelers swept past me, clutching boarding passes, their voices full of anticipation. I had none. My family was walking away from me, and I was left with nothing but betrayal and an emptiness that pressed hard against my chest. But even in that moment, beneath the sting of humiliation, something inside me began to steady. They thought I would accept this. They thought I would quietly disappear. They had no idea what was coming. The idea began innocently, the way good intentions often do. One Sunday afternoon in March, we were all gathered at Simon's house for dinner. The grandkids were chasing each other across the living room. Fern was setting out dishes, and Simon leaned back in his chair and said, "Dad, you should do something special this year. Something the whole family will never forget." His words landed deep. Since Martha passed away, the house had felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and makes every day heavier. A trip, I thought, might break that silence. A chance to build new memories, not replace the old, but carry them forward. Hawaii came up almost immediately. Fern pulled out a brochure from a drawer as if she had been waiting for the moment. White sand beaches, turquoise water, luau's under the stars. The children lit up. Mia clapped her hands and asked if we could see dolphins. Ethan wanted to learn surfing. Pearl, my daughter-in-law's mother, said she had always wanted to wear a flower lei at sunset. Saul, her husband, nodded quietly, but with a small smile, already picturing himself on a shaded porch. Even Simon leaned across the table with the kind of energy I hadn't seen from him in years. "Dad, leave everything to me. I'll handle the bookings, the hotel, the flights. You just relax and enjoy yourself." I believed him. More than that, I wanted to believe him. For years I had been the planner, the one carrying the weight of details, bills, logistics. Maybe this was the time to hand the reins to my son. Maybe this was the time for him to take care of me. A week later, I wired him $20,000. It wasn't a small amount, but I didn't hesitate. I told myself it was for the children, for the chance to watch their faces when they felt warm. Hawaiian sand, for the first time. It was for Martha, too. She had always dreamed of a trip like this, but life, responsibilities, and later illness had kept us close to home. I thought, at least I could give her grandchildren the gift she never had. The following weeks became filled with anticipation. Family dinners turned into planning sessions. The kids drew pictures of palm trees and dolphins and taped them to my refrigerator. Fern scrolled through restaurant menus online, describing fresh seafood and pineapple desserts. Simon nodded along, occasionally tapping notes into his phone, assuring us that everything was under control. Every detail felt like a thread pulling us closer to something brighter, something worth waiting for. I bought new clothes, lighter shirts, comfortable sandals, even a wide-brimmed hat Martha would have teased me about. My neighbor saw me outside trimming the hedges one evening and asked if I was heading somewhere. Hawaii, I said with a smile that surprised even me. For once, I was looking forward to something instead of enduring it. At night, I would sit in Martha's old chair by the window and picture the trip. I saw Ethan holding my hand as we walked along the surf, Mia tugging at my sleeve to show me seashells. I imagined evenings with the whole family gathered around a table under swaying palms, laughter replacing the silence that had haunted me for years. This trip was more than a vacation. It was a lifeline. And through it all, I never doubted Simon. I never questioned his reassurances. When he said the bookings were nearly complete, I nodded. When he promised the hotel had ocean view suites, I smiled. When he said the flights were secured, I believed him. After all, why wouldn't I? He was my son. I thought I was buying memories. What I didn't know was that I had just funded my own betrayal. The San Francisco airport was buzzing with its usual mix of chaos and excitement. Families rushed past me, their arms full of beach bags and oversized suitcases, voices rising with anticipation about luau's and ocean breezes. My own suitcase rattled along beside me, its weight suddenly feeling heavier with every step. I had been rehearsing this moment for months, picturing myself checking in with my family, handing over my boarding pass, and starting the long-awaited journey to Hawaii. Instead, I found myself frozen in front of the check-in counter, my son's words still echoing like a curse. I forgot to buy your ticket. Just go home. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. We had spent 3 months planning this. I had given him $20,000 to cover the entire trip. Yet, when I handed my name to the airline agent, her polite smile faltered. "Sir, I don't see a reservation for you." She typed again, fingers moving quickly over her keyboard. The reflection of the screen glinted in her glasses, and after another moment, she looked up. "I do see a reservation for Simon Willis. Party of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, booked 6 weeks ago. But no Lee Willis attached, 6 weeks ago. Not 3 months, when the idea had been born. Not last week, when Simon said he was finalizing details. 6 weeks ago, when, apparently, they had already decided I would not be part of it." I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the counter as the room seemed to tilt slightly. "There must be a mistake." "Could you check again?" I insisted. She gave me a look of sympathy that made my stomach twist. "I've checked twice, sir. There's no ticket for you." Behind me, Simon stood several feet away, pretending to pace near the security entrance. He wouldn't even look at me. My heart pounded as I turned toward him. "Simon, what is this?" I asked. "You said we were booked months ago. You said everything was ready." His face hardened. "Dad, it's complicated. The flights were nearly full. It was impossible to adjust later." I stared at him in disbelief. Impossible to add one person? Impossible to add the man who paid for all of this? The agent offered quietly, "I can check other flights for you, though I should warn you. Today is fully booked with a convention in Honolulu." I nodded numbly, clinging to the possibility of fixing this. She searched, but each option vanished before hope could take root. Standby lists were overflowing. Tomorrow's flights were already packed. She finally said, "There is 1 seat on a red-eye tomorrow with 2 stops. It arrives late Thursday, but it's nearly $1,800. I started to reach for my wallet, ready to pay whatever it took. But when I looked over, Simon was suddenly at my elbow, his hand closing tightly on my arm. "Dad, stop," he said in a tone that chilled me. "It's not worth it. Just go home." His grip tightened, his jaw clenched. This isn't going to work. The way he said it made my chest ache, because I knew he wasn't talking about the flight. He was talking about me. Passengers behind us shuffled, annoyed by the delay. A little boy pointed at my tipped-over suitcase, tugging at his mother's sleeve. I steadied it. but my hands were trembling. "Simon, we've planned this for months. You said you wanted the kids to have memories with their grandfather." His eyes flickered with something that looked like impatience, not guilt. "Dad, listen. This vacation is happening today, with or without you. My family is already through security. We'll call you from the hotel. Go home." I felt dizzy, like I was being pulled under by a tide. Around me, voices blurred into meaningless noise. The overhead announcements, the roll of suitcase wheels, the chatter of families, all of it became a cruel backdrop to my son's betrayal. Just go home. And then came the final blow. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Simon lit up the screen. "Sorry, Dad. We'll call from the hotel. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself." As if I were some fragile burden they had finally set down. As if I hadn't just handed him $20,000 to fund the very trip they were about to enjoy without me. I stared at the words, my vision blurring for a moment, until they burned into my mind like a scar. The agent cleared her throat softly, trying to bring me back to the present. "Sir, do you want me to hold that Southwest seat for you?" I could hear the concern in her voice, genuine, human. But suddenly, the thought of scrambling for a seat, of following them like some forgotten extra, felt worse than staying behind. I forced my voice steady. "No, thank you. That won't be necessary." I turned from the counter, my suitcase rolling behind me, its wheels catching slightly on the carpet. My legs felt like lead, every step heavy with humiliation. Simon didn't try to stop me. He didn't even glance back. He walked through security with the easy stride of a man relieved, a man who had finally accomplished exactly what he wanted. The Hawaiian Airlines departure board flickered one last time. Flight 447 to Honolulu now showed closed for boarding, a finality that settled deep inside me. They were gone. I paused near the glass wall overlooking the runway. I could see the plane being prepared, luggage loaded, engines rumbling. Somewhere beyond those walls, my family was settling into their seats, laughing, maybe even toasting with the complimentary drinks, while I stood on the outside like an afterthought. For the first time, I understood the truth. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This had been planned all along. I tightened my grip on the handle of my suitcase. I had given them everything: money, trust, my hope for healing after Martha's death, and they had taken it as if it was theirs to use while discarding me like baggage too heavy to carry. But as I walked toward the exit, one thought pressed harder than all the pain. They believed I would simply go home and fade away. They believed I would accept this humiliation and quietly disappear. They had no idea what was coming. The automatic doors slid open, and the heavy air of the Bay Area rushed over me as I stepped out of the terminal. My suitcase wheels bumped over the concrete, the weight no longer physical, but emotional, dragging behind me like an anchor. I joined the taxi line, watching families climb into vans, packed with luggage, their laughter spilling into the air. A father hoisted his child onto his shoulders, both of them grinning. The sight stung. That should have been me with my grandchildren, carrying their excitement as much as their bags. Instead, I was standing alone, a stranger to the joy I had paid for. When my turn came, I slid into the back seat of a cab that smelled faintly of coffee and vinyl. The driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, glanced at me in the mirror. "Where to?" he asked. "Oakland, Montclair District," I replied. He nodded, pulled into the stream of traffic, and the silence of the ride settled in. I stared out the window as the airport receded, the Bay Bridge looming in the distance. My mind began replaying conversations from the past 3 months, now colored with the ugly light of hindsight. Fern suggesting that maybe I'd be more comfortable at a quieter hotel away from the kids. Pearl's casual comment that older folks sometimes needed different activities. Simon insisting over and over again, "Leave the details to me. Dad, I'll handle everything." At the time, I'd taken it as enthusiasm, even responsibility. Now it all looked like careful preparation for my exclusion. The driver's voice cut into my thoughts. Rough day? His tone carried a kind of weary camaraderie. I let out a bitter laugh. You ever have your family turn on you? His eyes flicked up in the mirror, then back to the road. Brother, I've got 2 ex-wives and 3 kids who don't talk to me unless they want money. Family knows exactly where to stick the knife. The word hit me hard. Knife. That was exactly what it felt like. Not a clumsy accident, not a misstep, but a sharp, deliberate cut aimed where it would hurt the most. I gave them everything, I said quietly, almost to myself. I thought this vacation was going to heal us. The driver shrugged, one hand drumming on the wheel. People mistake kindness for weakness. Do it long enough, and they forget you can bite back. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, his words settling deep. Bite back. The idea of retaliation had seemed foreign minutes ago, when I was still raw with humiliation. But now, as the car wound its way through Daly City, something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, but beneath it, something harder was forming. They thought I was blind, I continued, my voice steadier now. They took my money, made their plans, and figured I'd just roll over when the truth came out. The driver chuckled without humor. Happens more than you think. People will bleed you dry if you let them. The trick is showing them you're not the easy mark they think you are. The city lights flickered against the windshield as we crossed into Oakland. I felt Martha's absence more keenly than ever, but at the same time, I could almost hear her voice. Don't let people confuse kindness with weakness. She had said that often in her life, standing firm against anyone who tried to dismiss her strength. By the time we turned onto Highway 24, my chest no longer felt hollow. Instead, a cold clarity had taken root. They believed I would simply accept this, that I would shrink back into my empty house, licking my wounds. But they didn't know me as well as they thought. I hadn't survived 68 years, 3 recessions, and the loss of the woman I loved by being weak. The driver pulled into my driveway, the tires crunching softly over the gravel. That'll be $47.50, he said. I handed him $60. Keep the change. He gave me a knowing look. Whatever you're planning, I hope they deserve it. I stepped out of the cab with my suitcase, the night air cool against my skin. They thought they had left me behind. What they had really done was wake up a part of me I hadn't felt in years. The house greeted me with its familiar stillness, the kind of quiet that used to comfort me after long workdays, but now felt like a reminder of absence. I set my suitcase down in the hallway and moved straight toward the office. If there was one thing my years as an engineer had taught me, it was this. Problems required documentation. Martha's oak desk stood waiting by the window, polished to a soft sheen that carried her memory. I pulled open the second drawer, where I kept important files, and found the folder labeled Hawaii 2025 in my own handwriting. I placed it on the desk, the weight of it heavier than paper should feel, and began laying out its contents. There was the transfer receipt, $20,000 wired to Simon's account 6 weeks ago. I traced the date with my finger, remembering how proud I had felt sending that money, imagining what it would mean to the grandchildren. Then came the hotel confirmation. Grand Wiley Resort, Ocean View Suites, 10 nights. I read down the list of names carefully, one by one, until my heart stopped. Simon, Fern Pearl, Saul, Mia, Ethan, and then Martha. Not me, not Lee Willis, the man who had paid for the trip, but Martha, my late wife, gone 3 years. They had put her name down instead of mine, as if mocking her memory, as if erasing me entirely from the family she had loved so fiercely. My chest tightened, and for a moment I had to steady myself against the desk. This was more than betrayal. It was desecration. The rage came slowly at first, a low simmer, then it crystallized into something sharp and unyielding. I remembered Martha's words, spoken so many times when life pressed against us. Sometimes kindness is mistaken for weakness. Don't let them confuse the two, Lee. My hand clenched around the paper until it crumpled, but then I forced myself to smooth it out again. Evidence had to be preserved. I added bank statements showing years of quiet support for Simon. Mortgage payments I had covered during his job changes, tuition for Mia's violin lessons, even medical bills I had taken care of without asking for repayment. Page after page of generosity that had been met with deception. As I spread the documents across the desk, the picture became undeniable. This was not a mistake. This was not an oversight. This was a carefully orchestrated exclusion. I sat down in Martha's chair and stared at the collection of papers. The man they thought they had discarded was still here, breathing, thinking, planning, and the kindness they had mistaken for weakness was about to become their undoing. The phone sat on the corner of the desk, its cord coiled neatly beside it. Not the cell phone, which still buzzed occasionally with unanswered messages from Hawaii, but the landline Martha had insisted we keep. Something about it felt right, more deliberate, more official. I lifted the receiver, dialed directory assistance, and asked for the number of the Grand Waila Resort. A voice answered after 2 rings, warm and practiced, carrying the hospitality tone of someone trained to soothe. Grand Waila Reservations. This is Koa. How may I help you today? I cleared my throat, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I need to cancel a reservation under the name Willis. Of course, sir, let me pull that up. She typed for a moment. Yes, I see a booking for 10 nights, Ocean View Suites, party of 7. Checking in tomorrow. Is that correct? That's the one. Cancel it. There was a pause on the line. Sir, this is a very substantial reservation. Are you sure you'd like to proceed with cancellation? We can offer alternatives, different room types, even partial stays. No alternatives, I said firmly. Cancel everything. More typing followed. Mr. Willis, I must inform you that canceling this close to arrival will result in significant penalties. The total cancellation fee is $3,200. $3,200. A fraction compared to the $20,000 they had stolen, and worth every cent. That's acceptable, I replied. Very well, sir. I will process this immediately. You should receive confirmation by email within the hour. May I ask what you'd like us to tell the arriving party? Tell them it was canceled by the primary booking party at 6:47 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure the record is clear. Yes, sir. That will be noted. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? No, you've done enough. Thank you. I hung up and stared at the receiver in my hand. A strange calm settled over me, replacing the earlier rage. For the first time since the airport, I felt in control. They had thought I would fade quietly into the background. Instead, I had just pulled the rug out from under their dream vacation. The thought of them arriving at that resort tomorrow, bags in hand, children excited, only to be told there were no rooms. That image burned in my mind like a beacon. Simon's face tightening as the clerk explained the cancellation. Fern scrambling to smooth things over. Pearl demanding answers. Saul silently calculating the disaster. And the grandchildren caught in the middle of the chaos. It wasn't vengeance I felt. It was balance. A deliberate reminder that betrayal has consequences. I gathered the papers back into the folder, smoothing each one carefully before tucking it away. This was evidence now, not just memory. Proof of how trust had been abused. Proof of the lies I had swallowed willingly. Proof that the man they thought they could manipulate had found his resolve. As the evening sun slanted across the room, I glanced at the framed photograph on the bookshelf. Last Christmas, all of them gathered around my tree, tearing open presents I had bought, eating food I had paid for, smiling at me with the kind of warmth that hid knives behind their backs. I stared at Martha's face in that picture, her smile bright, her eyes steady, and I whispered into the empty room, kindness is not weakness. The house grew darker as the sun slipped behind the hills. I closed the folder, placed it in the center of the desk, and rose to my feet. The decision was made. The first move had been played. They thought I would disappear. Instead, I was just beginning. That night, my house was lit only by the soft glow of the lamp in the living room. The evidence folder sat on the desk in front of me, papers neatly stacked, each one a reminder of what had been stolen. My cell phone buzzed where it rested on the side table. When I glanced at the screen, I saw the first of many calls from a Hawaii number. I ignored it, letting it ring until the voicemail tone sounded. Moments later, it buzzed again, then again. The rhythm repeated, every few minutes, as though the ocean waves themselves were carrying desperation across the miles. Finally, I picked it up long enough to scroll through the growing list of missed calls. By midnight, there were 15. By 1 in the morning, nearly 30. I brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into Martha's favorite mug, and sat back down with my notepad. If they were going to talk, I was going to write. The first voicemail was Simon's voice, sharp and panicked. "Dad, call me back. The hotel says the reservation was canceled. Tell me you didn't do this. Call me right now." The second came minutes later. "This isn't funny, Dad. We're stuck here with no rooms. The kids are crying. Fern is furious. Call me back." I wrote the words down exactly as they came. Kids crying. Fern furious. My hand was steady, my coffee warm. By the third message, his tone had changed. "Dad, listen. I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to fix this. We don't deserve this. Call the hotel and put it back the way it was." I underlined the word deserve twice. The calls continued through the night, escalating like the progression of a storm. Fern's voice appeared in one, strained and tight. "Lee, please, think about the children. They don't understand what's happening. You can't punish them for something between you and Simon." I paused the message, set the phone down, and took another sip of coffee. Punish? That word cut through the night like glass. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was drawing a line they had crossed long before they reached Hawaii. By the early hours of morning, Simon's messages had shifted again, from pleas to threats. "You think you've won something here? You haven't. When we get back, you're going to regret this. Old man, you don't know who you're messing with." I wrote every word, careful block letters filling the page. "You're going to regret this. Old man." The role reversal wasn't lost on me. For decades, I had been the one writing checks, making sacrifices, keeping the family afloat. Now, Simon was the one stranded, begging, demanding, trying every tactic to reel me back into the role of provider. But the more he called, the more detached I became. Around 4 in the morning, the calls slowed. By then, I had 3 full pages of notes: accusations, threats, manipulations. My phone vibrated one last time with a message that carried no anger, only exhaustion. "Dad, please. The kids are asleep on the lobby chairs. We don't know what to do. Please call me back." For a moment, my chest ached at the image. My grandchildren curled up on uncomfortable seats, their innocence caught in the wreckage of their parents' choices. But then I remembered the airport, the suitcase I had dragged behind me, the way Simon's eyes had shown relief, not guilt, when he told me to go home. That moment weighed heavier than any plea could. I set the phone down face first, silencing its glow. The house was quiet again, except for the ticking of Martha's old clock and the rustle of my pen across paper. I looked at the stack of notes, black ink against white, and realized that I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the record keeper, the one turning their cruelty into evidence. The sun rose slowly, casting pale light through the blinds. My phone, silent now, showed 56 missed calls, each one a symbol of their unraveling. I closed the notebook, laid my pen across the cover, and whispered into the morning air. Kindness is not weakness. Not anymore. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, soft and golden, illuminating the scattered papers still covering my desk. The notebook lay open to the pages where I had carefully transcribed Simon's words from the night before. Threats, accusations, pleas. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, steady. Evidence, not emotion. Yet beneath the calm, I felt the ache of years rising to the surface. The truth was that this betrayal had not begun at the airport. It had been building for decades. I pulled another file from the cabinet, one labeled Family Support, its edges worn from years of use. Inside were records of every time I had stepped in, every time Simon had leaned on me. Mortgage payments when he lost his job the first time. Tuition checks when he couldn't cover the children's schooling. Medical bills when Fern had surgery and insurance fell short. Bank transfers for car repairs, for holiday, gifts, for emergencies both real and manufactured. Page after page, year after year, I had quietly filled the gaps, telling myself it was my duty as a father. I thought back to Martha, her steady presence and sharper wisdom. She had warned me more than once, usually in the quiet of evenings after the house had settled. "Lee," she would say, "don't let people confuse kindness with weakness." Her words were not harsh, just firm, spoken from the experience of a nurse who had seen too many people give until they had nothing left. I had always nodded, always promised I would be careful. And yet here I was, 3 years after her passing, staring at the proof that my kindness had been exploited until it twisted into betrayal. I traced my finger along one of the bank statements, remembering the night I had wired Simon money to keep him from losing his house. He had promised he would pay me back, promised that this time would be different. That promise had faded just like all the others. I had believed him because I wanted to, because I thought helping him meant holding on to family. Martha would have seen through it. Martha would have told me that love did not mean being used. The grief of her absence washed over me again, not sharp but steady, like the tide returning. I missed her voice, her way of grounding me when life tilted off balance. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined what she would say if she could see me now, sitting in this office surrounded by proof of my son's greed. She would remind me of her warning, remind me that strength was not cruelty, and that boundaries were a form of love too. I opened my eyes and looked again at the evidence. There was no mistaking it now. Simon had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He had not only taken my money, but erased me from the life of my grandchildren, replacing me with the name of my dead wife, as though my presence was disposable. That was not forgetfulness. That was intention. That was calculation. The ache of betrayal sharpened into something else. Resolve I had spent years enabling, years patching holes in Simon's life that he never learned to fix himself. I had told myself I was helping, when in truth I was teaching him that I would always be there to catch him. That lesson ended now. I leaned back in Martha's chair, the leather creaking softly, and spoke aloud into the quiet room. No more. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of decades. No more covering debts, no more quiet sacrifices, no more waiting for gratitude that never came. It was time for something different. Not revenge, not petty payback, but justice. Justice that was clean, deliberate, and final. Simon wanted to test what would happen if he pushed me to the edge. He was about to learn that kindness was not weakness, and that betrayal has consequences. I gathered the papers into the folder and closed it with a firm hand. The decision had been made. Martha's wisdom had guided me here, and my own resolve would carry me forward. The man who had walked into that airport with hope was gone. The man who sat here now was something else entirely. Justice? I whispered again, as though the word itself could steady me. It was not about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity, about drawing a line that could not be crossed again. For the first time in years, I felt clarity settle over me like armor. This time, I would not be used. This time, I would not be erased. The following afternoon, I drove into San Francisco with the evidence folder resting on the passenger seat beside me. The streets bustled with the usual weekday rhythm, but for me, each stoplight and turn felt like part of a march towards something irreversible. Martha's words were steady in my head. Don't let people confuse kindness with weakness. Today, I was going to turn those words into law. Bruce Harlan's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass building overlooking the bay. It was the kind of place where the lobby smelled faintly of leather and polish, where every detail projected authority. Bruce had been Martha's choice years ago, when we had to settle her estate. He handled that painful chapter with the kind of competence that left no doubt. I knew he was the man I needed now. His receptionist, a young woman named Jennifer, ushered me into his office. Bruce rose from behind a polished mahogany desk, his handshake firm, his presence calm. He was in his mid-50s, with silver hair at his temples and sharp eyes that had clearly spent decades assessing more than what clients said out loud. "Lee," he said, motioning for me to sit. "It's been a while. What brings you in today?" I placed the folder on his desk and opened it, sliding forward the stack of bank statements, invoices, and handwritten notes from the voicemails. "Betrayal, Bruce," I said evenly. "My son left me at an airport after taking $20,000 of my money. He planned it. And now he's been calling me all night from Hawaii, making threats." Bruce leaned forward, scanning the documents with practiced precision. He picked up the notes I had made and read silently for a moment. His expression did not change, but I could see the calculations behind his eyes. Finally, he looked up. "You've done something very smart here, Lee. Writing everything down, keeping evidence. Most people don't think to do that when emotions are running high." "I wanted a record," I replied. "This isn't about emotion anymore. This is about clarity." Bruce tapped one of the pages with his pen. "Your son said you would regret this. He called you old man. He accused you of cruelty. All of this paints a very specific picture. Financial exploitation combined with threatening language. In California, that's powerful." I watched him make notes on a legal pad, his pen scratching steadily across the page. "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means you have options," Bruce answered. "The most direct is disinheritance. You can revise your will to exclude Simon entirely. We can draft it in a way that makes it nearly impossible to challenge. With the evidence you've provided, a court would have no reason to believe you acted out of anything but sound judgment." I sat back, absorbing the weight of his words. Disinheritance, the final line. Bruce continued. "We'll structure the language carefully. Not just that he is excluded, but why. We'll reference the financial history, the pattern of dependency, and these recent threats. We'll add witness signatures, notarization, and even a video recording of you executing the documents to show competency. It will be airtight." "And if he tries to fight it?" I asked. "Then he'll lose," Bruce said simply. "Contesting a will is costly, and judges don't take kindly to children who exploit their parents, especially when the parent has documentation like this." I thought of Simon's voice in the voicemails, the sharp edge, the desperation. I imagined him sitting in a courtroom, trying to explain why he told me to go home after taking my money. The image almost made me laugh. Almost? Bruce folded his hands. "I need to ask you directly, Lee. Are you certain about this? Once we execute these documents, your relationship with Simon may never recover." I met his eyes, steady. "They changed first," I said. "I'm just making it official." The silence that followed was not empty but full of understanding. Bruce nodded, slowly, as though sealing my words into the record. "Very well," he said. "Then let's begin." For the next hour, we worked through details. He asked about charitable organizations I cared about, and I named the Oakland Children's Education Foundation, UC Berkeley's engineering scholarships, senior services, and veterans programs. If my wealth was not going to strengthen my family, then it would strengthen the community. Bruce drafted preliminary language on his computer while I answered questions about my assets. Real estate, investments, retirement accounts, everything was laid out like a map of my life. Each line was another piece of proof that I had worked, saved, and built something worth protecting. And each line was a reminder that Simon had seen me as nothing more than a bank. When we finished, Bruce closed his file with deliberate care. "I'll prepare the full documents and have them ready for signing within a week," he said. "We'll arrange witnesses, a notary, and a video record. When it's done, there will be no doubt." I stood, my chair sliding back against the carpet. For the first time in weeks, I felt taller, lighter, as though the burden I had been carrying had shifted into something solid, something defendable. "Thank you, Bruce," I said, extending my hand. He shook it firmly. "You did the right thing by coming here, Lee. This isn't revenge. It's protection. It's justice." As I left his office, the late afternoon light stretched across the bay, the water glinting gold. I thought of Martha again, of her quiet, strength, and her warning that kindness must have boundaries. I had failed to listen then, but today I had listened. By the time I reached the parking garage, I knew something had changed permanently. No matter what happened next, Simon would never again confuse my love for weakness. The papers would make certain of that. Bruce wasted no time once I had given my answer. He spread the documents across his desk, the glow of his computer monitor reflecting in his glasses as he began typing the draft that would reshape the future. His pen tapped occasionally against the desk as he confirmed details, but his manner remained steady, professional, precise. "Let's begin with the beneficiaries," he said. "Who do you want to inherit what you've built?" The question carried weight. For years, the answer would have been automatic: Simon and his family. Now the answer came from a place both firmer and freer. I told him about the Oakland Children's Education Foundation, about UC Berkeley's Engineering Scholarship Program, about local senior services and veterans initiatives. I wanted my money to reach people who would never mistake generosity for weakness. Bruce nodded as he typed, his voice calm. "We'll allocate percentages to each cause with detailed instructions. No ambiguity, no loopholes." He explained that clear directives prevented challenges, and every line he wrote seemed to close a door that Simon could have tried to pry open. When it came to the exclusion, Bruce turned the monitor toward me. "This is the critical clause," he said. "It needs to be firm and explicit." The language declared that Simon Willis was intentionally disinherited due to a documented history of financial exploitation and threatening behavior. Bruce included references to my notes, to the voicemails, to the transfers I had recorded. It was not simply a statement of exclusion, but a record of justification. I read the words slowly, my finger tracing the lines. They were sharp, undeniable, yet strangely calm. There was no anger in the text, only clarity. It struck me that this was the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge shouts, justice states. "We also need to address the grandchildren," Bruce continued. "Do you want them to receive anything directly?" I hesitated, thinking of Mia and Ethan, their laughter around my table, their drawings pinned to my refrigerator. They were innocent, yet they lived in a house shaped by Simon's decisions. After a moment, I shook my head. "They'll inherit values," I said, "not money. If they need help, it will come from scholarships and programs designed for children like them. That way, they won't be tied to Simon's hand." Bruce typed steadily. "That protects them in a way money never could," he agreed. Page by page, the will took shape. Each section read like a declaration of boundaries that should have been drawn long ago. The real estate went to charity, the investments divided among education and service organizations, the smaller. Assets distributed with care. Nothing was left vague. Nothing was left vulnerable. We'll add what's called a no-contest clause, Bruce explained. If Simon attempts to challenge this will, he risks losing even the possibility of minor assets. It creates a strong deterrent. I felt a cold satisfaction at that. For once, Simon would have to face a system he could not manipulate with guilt or threats. Bruce leaned back after several hours of drafting. We'll schedule the signing next week, with witnesses and a notary. Everything will be recorded. Once this is executed, Simon will have no path back to these assets. I nodded. This isn't easy, I admitted, but it's necessary. Bruce studied me for a moment. You understand this may lead to confrontation when they return from Hawaii, he said. Simon will expect you to still be the same man who gave him everything. I thought of the airport, of standing at the counter while the agent told me my name was never on the list. I thought of Simon's text. Take care of yourself. He had already drawn the line, already decided who I was to him. That was the day he ended the old relationship. What I was doing now was simply making the change official. They changed first, I told Bruce. I'm just making it official. Outside the window, the bay stretched out in the late afternoon sun, calm on the surface, strong beneath. I felt something similar within myself. Calm, steady, resolved. The will was more than legal protection. It was a message, a record, a mirror Simon would have to face. As I left the office, the sound of traffic drifted up from the street, but in my ears it was the sound of preparation. In a matter of weeks, Simon would step off a plane expecting to face the father he thought he controlled. Instead, he would meet a man with documents, witnesses, and law on his side. The airport where he had discarded me would become the place where his own world began to unravel. The following week, I returned to Bruce Harlan's office for the final step. The conference room had been arranged with quiet ceremony, as though everyone present understood the gravity of what was about to happen. On the polished oak table sat the final draft of my new will, thick with pages of clauses, percentages, and airtight protections. Bruce stood to greet me with his usual steady professionalism, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him sat his secretary, Mrs. Chen, who would serve as a witness, and a young paralegal named David, who managed a small tripod with a recording device. Every detail had been thought through to ensure what happened here would stand forever. We're going to conduct this carefully, Bruce said, his tone measured. The signing will be witnessed, notarized, and video recorded. Once this is complete, there will be no question of your capacity or your intentions. I nodded, sitting down before the thick sheaf of papers. The ink on the first page gleamed under the light. For a long moment, I just looked at it. So much of my life had been spent giving freely. College tuition for Simon, mortgages, vacations, countless unspoken rescues. Now, here was the document that drew the final line. Mrs. Chen adjusted her glasses and asked me to state my name and the date for the record. My voice was clear. Lee Willis, June 3rd, 2025. I am here of my own free choice. Bruce read aloud the central provisions, each word landing with the authority of both law and truth. The testator, Lee Willis, being of sound mind and judgment, hereby excludes his son, Simon Willis, from all inheritance due to demonstrated financial exploitation and threatening behavior. The assets shall instead be distributed to designated charitable beneficiaries, including the Oakland Children's Education Foundation, UC Berkeley's Engineering Scholarship Program, Senior Services, and Veterans Initiatives. Listening to him, I felt the words settle into the room like stone pillars, immovable, undeniable. Simon's name struck from the future, erased not by anger, but by clarity. David confirmed the video was recording as I signed each page. The pen moved steadily across the paper, leaving ink that would outlast memory. Outlast excuses. Each stroke was deliberate, almost ritual. I thought of Martha's steady hand when she used to write grocery lists, careful in her lettering, as if even small things deserved attention. She would have approved of this. Careful, final, precise. When I set the pen down after the last signature, Bruce applied the notary seal with a firm press. The embossed imprint caught the light, official and permanent. He gathered the pages into an orderly stack, binding them with a leather cover. "Ink becomes armor," he said softly, handing me a sealed copy. The weight in my hand felt heavier than paper. It felt like protection, like dignity returned in tangible form. Bruce studied me carefully. "Lee, you understand what this means. Simon will not inherit a penny of what you built." I met his gaze without hesitation. "Justice isn't revenge," I said. "It's protection." He made his choices. Now I've made mine. The witnesses signed, the notary confirmed, and the video camera was switched off. Just like that, decades of exploitation had been answered not with shouting or threats, but with calm legality. It was the cleanest form of justice I could imagine. When the meeting concluded, I walked out of the building with the sealed copy under my arm. The city outside bustled as it always did, cars honking, people rushing to appointments. But for me, the world felt steadier. What had been fractured was now secured. As I crossed the plaza, I thought about Simon's return from Hawaii. He would come back expecting me to argue, to beg, to fold under guilt. Instead, he would find this: the quiet authority of law waiting like a shadow he never saw forming. For the first time in a long while, I felt unshakable. The week after signing the will felt unlike any I had known in years. For the first time since Martha's passing, I found myself at peace with silence. The house no longer felt like a hollow container echoing with absence. It felt like a fortress, not because of locks or alarms, but because my choices had finally become boundaries no one could cross. Mornings began with coffee brewed in the old percolator, its rhythmic bubbling like a quiet companion. I would sit by the window in Martha's chair, watching the neighborhood unfold, the mailman making his rounds, children chasing one another down the street before school, the hum of ordinary life. It was calm, almost meditative, and in sharp contrast to the chaos, I imagined my family navigating on their trip. I pictured the resort breakfasts with their sprawling buffets, the forced smiles over tropical cocktails, the strained moments when reality seeped in. While they tried to hold their fractured image together under Hawaiian sun, I was rediscovering stillness. I did not pace the floors, nor did I linger over what-ifs. Each day passed with a clarity that made me feel years younger. Afternoons became my time for long walks. The air in Oakland carried the scent of summer grass, and each step felt purposeful, grounding me in the life I still owned. Neighbors waved, asked about my garden, invited me to sit for a while. I declined politely, preferring solitude, though their kindness reminded me that family isn't always bound by blood. Evenings I reserved for Martha's books. She had left shelves filled with novels she always meant to revisit. I opened one at random each night, and the pages felt like threads connecting me back to her voice. Sometimes I would hear her warning, the same one she had repeated gently over the years. "Don't let people confuse kindness with weakness." That phrase became my anchor. And beneath all of this peace, tension quietly hummed. Because I knew what was coming. Simon and his family would return soon. Their flight was already booked, their luggage destined to roll once again across the tiles of San Francisco International Airport. They would expect explanations, excuses, some way back into the comfort they had betrayed. But the difference now was simple. I no longer feared the confrontation. I welcomed it. Each passing day of calm made me stronger, each night of dreamless sleep steadier. My world no longer revolved around their approval or inclusion. It revolved around truth, and truth had been put on paper, sealed with ink, and locked beyond their reach. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the distance. But for now, the waiting weeks belonged to me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt ready. San Francisco International bustled with the rhythm of returning travelers. The intercom crackled flight updates, suitcases rolled across tile, and families reunited with long embraces. I stood just beyond the security doors, my lawyer Bruce Harland, steady at my side, the sealed portfolio tucked neatly under his arm. My heart beat, calmly, almost methodically, because this moment had been waiting for 3 weeks. The sliding doors opened with a rush of returning passengers. Tanned couples carried duty-free bags. Children clutched stuffed dolphins and plastic ukuleles. Parents tried to shepherd them all forward. And then I saw them. Pearl emerged first, her oversized straw hat crooked with travel wear, chattering to Saul about some story from the flight. Saul trailed behind with his usual quiet patience, managing the weight of 2 overstuffed suitcases. Behind them came Fern, gripping the hands of Mia and Ethan. The children's eyes darted eagerly through the crowd, scanning for something familiar. Last came Simon. His Hawaiian shirt was wrinkled, his face bronzed from the island sun, and his expression carried the self-satisfaction of a man who believed the crisis was behind him. Then Mia spotted me. She shrieked, "Grandpa!" and broke from her mother's grasp, darting through the crowd with Ethan close behind. Their small arms wrapped around my waist, their faces pressed into my chest with innocent joy. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa Lee, we saw dolphins." And I learned to swim without my floaties. Their love was genuine, untainted by the ugliness that had poisoned the adults around them. For one aching moment, I held them tight, feeling both the sweetness of their affection and the sting of what their parents had done. Simon froze mid-step, his relaxed swagger crumbling as he processed the scene. His eyes moved from me to Bruce, to the thick portfolio under his arm. His lips parted slightly, disbelief flickering into dread. He understood instantly that something was waiting for him here, something far heavier than a family reunion. "Dad," Simon said finally, his voice sharp with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" I kept my hand on Ethan's shoulder, steady and calm. "Welcoming you home." "How was Hawaii?" Fern approached, her smile stiff, confusion etched into her eyes. She noticed Bruce, noticed the air of formality he carried, and her voice tightened. "Lee, what's going on? Why are you here with a lawyer?" Before I could answer, Bruce stepped forward, his tone precise. "Mr. Simon Willis, I am Bruce Harland, attorney for your father. On his behalf, I am delivering official documents." He extended the sealed envelope with deliberate gravity. Simon blinked, took the envelope, and stared at it as though it might burn his hands. Pearl stopped chattering, finally noticing the tension radiating around us. "What's all this fuss? We just got back. Can't this wait until we've rested?" Simon tore the envelope open, yanking out the neatly folded pages. His eyes raced across the lines, confusion collapsing into fury as he reached the crucial sections. His hands shook as he looked up at me, his voice rising. "You can't be serious. This says I'm cut out. Completely. You gave everything away." I met his gaze, evenly. "No, Simon. I didn't give everything away. I protected it. From you." Fern's hand darted to the papers, her eyes scanning quickly, her face draining of color. "Is this legal?" "This can't be real," Bruce answered smoothly. "It is not only real, Mrs. Willis. It is fully enforceable under California probate law. Every provision is airtight. The will is notarized, witnessed, and recorded on video to prevent any challenge." Simon's face darkened, the tan of his Hawaiian vacation doing nothing to hide the red flushing across his skin. "This is insane. You can't disinherit your own son. Family doesn't work like that." I kept my voice level. "Family doesn't work like what you did, Simon. Taking $20,000, excluding me from the trip, leaving me at an airport like forgotten luggage. That wasn't family. That was betrayal." Pearl blinked rapidly, still not fully grasping the weight of the confrontation. Lee, surely this can be talked through. Think about the children. I did think about them, I said softly. I looked down at Mia and Ethan, still clinging to me, confused but safe in their innocence. That's why I paid for their vacation. And that's why I've chosen to fund scholarships and children's programs that will help generations of kids who never had the chances mine already have. Simon's jaw clenched, his voice harsh. You'll regret this. You think you can control us with money, but this isn't over. Bruce's calm interjection cut through the rising anger. I advise you to be careful with your words, mister. Willis' threats only strengthen the validity of your father's decision, and they are documented. Fern tried another tactic, her voice almost pleading. Lee, please. We made mistakes. The kids were so excited. Simon got overwhelmed, and yes, he handled things badly. But this is extreme. Can't you reconsider? Think about how this will affect everyone. I looked at her, then back at Simon. You ask me to think about everyone, but when you stood at that airport, did you think about me? Did you think about what it meant to erase me from my own family's trip? You thought I would swallow it, that I'd go home quietly. You were wrong. Mia tugged at my sleeve again, whispering, Why is Daddy yelling, Grandpa? My chest ached at her question, but I crouched low to meet her eyes. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, and sometimes those choices have consequences. Simon's voice cracked into raw anger. Consequences? You think this is justice? You're destroying your own family. I rose slowly, my presence steady, my voice measured. I'm not destroying my family, Simon. I'm protecting what I built from being destroyed by greed. This isn't betrayal. This is consequence. The words hung heavy in the air, cutting sharper than anything else I could have said. Around us, the flow of travelers continued, but in that circle of confrontation, everything stilled. Pearl whispered, Oh my, and Saul gently guided her a few steps back, understanding more than he let on. Simon looked down at the papers again, his hands trembling with rage and disbelief. Fern's eyes shimmered with panic, her mind calculating the losses. The children clung tighter to me, innocent anchors in a storm of adult failures. And I stood tall, no longer the man left behind at the airport, but the man who had chosen clarity over compromise, protection over appeasement. The confrontation was over, at least for now, but the lesson had just begun. The ride home from the airport was quiet, though not in the hollow way it had been 3 weeks earlier when I returned alone. This time the silence felt earned, almost comforting, like the stillness that follows a storm finally pushed offshore. Bruce had shaken my hand firmly before leaving, assuring me that what had been done was permanent. My footsteps across the porch sounded measured, deliberate, the weight of betrayal replaced with the steady rhythm of resolution. Inside, the house welcomed me as it always had. The faint scent of furniture polish lingered, the steady tick of Martha's grandmother clock marking each second with calm certainty. For years I had thought of this house as too large, too empty after she passed. But tonight, it felt like a sanctuary again. I set the envelope of copies from Bruce on the desk in my office, the place where months of planning had first collapsed into betrayal and later transformed into clarity. Betrayal leaves scars, that much is true. I could still see Simon's face in the terminal, twisted with fury as the truth unfolded in his hands. I could still hear his voice spitting out threats, his desperation rising with each page of the will. That hurt, because no matter what he had done, he was still my son. A father doesn't easily shake the memory of holding his child for the first time, of teaching him how to ride a bike, of attending school plays and graduations. But hurt is not the same as weakness. Clarity comes when you finally see people as they are, not as you wish they would be. For years I had blurred that line. I told myself Simon's struggles were temporary, that his reliance on my money was just a phase, that one day he would stand on his own. I poured out financial support as if it might build character, when all it built was entitlement. Tonight, I accepted the truth. Kindness, without boundaries, had been mistaken for weakness. And Martha's old warning, "Don't let people confuse the two," resonated louder than ever. I walked to the mantel and looked at the photographs lined neatly across it. Simon's wedding picture stood beside Ethan's first soccer team portrait and Mia's dance recital. Their smiles looked genuine, yet now I understood how fragile family appearances could be. Betrayal may have come from Simon, but the grandchildren remained innocent. One day, they would learn the truth. Not through my bitterness, but through the stories their parents could never bury. They would know what greed cost them. They would know their grandfather had not abandoned them. He had chosen dignity over exploitation. In the meantime, my wealth would go where it belonged. Bruce's carefully drafted will ensured scholarships would be funded, meals would be served to seniors, books would find their way into the hands of students who could never have afforded them. Every hour I had worked as an engineer, every dollar I had saved, would ripple outward in ways Simon never could have imagined. That, too, was resolution. What once had been a tool for enabling became a force for good. As the night settled, I brewed a cup of tea and carried it to my favorite chair by the window. Outside, the garden Martha had planted swayed gently in the evening air. For years I had cared for those flowers because they reminded me of her. Now they reminded me of myself as well. Still standing, still rooted, still able to grow even after storms. The phone sat on the side table. I had no doubt Simon would call again, perhaps raging, perhaps pleading. But I didn't reach for it. Some conversations no longer needed to happen. What was done, and there was peace in that finality. As I sipped the tea, warmth spread through me. Betrayal had carved its wound, yes, but clarity had begun to heal it. Tomorrow I would call the foundations Bruce had named in the will, beginning the process of transferring my legacy where it could thrive. Tomorrow I would move forward. Tonight I allowed myself the quiet dignity of survival. The children would one day ask questions. They would piece together why things changed, why their father's inheritance never came. When that time arrived, the truth would be simple. Greed always costs more than it earns. For now, the house was still. The clock ticked, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Would you like me to also draft the ending CTA, 200 words, for video number 4, the way we did for video number 2 and number 3, to close this script with audience engagement and a tease for the next story? If your own family betrayed you after taking your money, what would you do? Would you quietly accept it? Or would you stand your ground and show them that trust has consequences? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your answer in the comments below, because every story like this carries lessons that others can learn from. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll never miss the moment when betrayal meets justice, when silence finally becomes power, and when stories like this remind us that dignity is worth defending at all costs. For me, this was more than a story about money. It was about drawing a line, about choosing clarity over enabling, about refusing to let greed define what family should mean. And I believe many of you watching have faced your own version of that crossroads. So stay tuned, because the next story dives even deeper into betrayal. The day I opened a letter and found my will had been rewritten behind my back. That was the day I discovered just how far some people will go.